Now, we've all had one of those days at work where you just can't stop looking up at the clock on the wall, counting down every second. 9 hours left, 2 hours left, just 1 hour left until I can get out of this place and go home. But once you do leave work and this countdown stops, a new one begins. How long until I have to return? 9 hours left, 2 hours left, just 1 hour left until I have to go back to work and do it again. But what if you could get rid of these countdowns, that longing for the workday to be over and that dread that tomorrow will come? Well, that's exactly what the series Severance shows us. A world where your consciousness can be split into two different people, so that at the very moment you walk into your job, all memories of who you were on the outside world vanish. And same goes for when you leave. All memories of what you got up to at work disappear. Your mind severed. No longer will your work life bring you unnecessary stress when at home, and no longer will your personal life interfere with you doing your job. What could possibly go wrong? It's a fascinating concept, and this show does everything that you could hope for with it, diving fully into all of the twisted ramifications that would come up with a technology like this. So I thought it would be fun to join these severed employees and take a look into the corporate horror of Severance. Now, the reason I say corporate horror is because this isn't your traditional kind of scary show with spooky monsters and a whole lot of blood and jump scares. Severance is much more psychological, in case you couldn't tell from the concept. It isn't trying to scare your eyes, it's trying to get inside of your head. And a horror like this will always stick with me long after the credits have rolled, because the terrifying part of Severance is that, on the surface, everything looks fine. It's never dark or poorly lit with a whole lot of shadows, it's bright, with one of the most neutral colour palettes of a show I've ever seen, with constant fluorescent lighting over everything. It looks like a normal show, set in a normal office. But right below this seemingly normal exterior lies characters who are very much suffering in what is quickly revealed to be a living hell. Because this Severance technology may seem beneficial at first. I mean, if you haven't seen the show, you may be thinking, wait, so you're telling me I never have to remember any of my time spent at work ever again? Sign me up right now. But the thing is, splitting your mind in two like this is only really beneficial to one side of you, the one outside of work. This side of you, which the show calls outies, will get to spend their time relaxing and having fun and doing whatever they want. All of their time is free time, but this comes at the cost of the other half of yourself, who the show calls innies. They absolutely cannot do whatever they want. None of their time is free time. By undergoing the severance procedure, you're creating a being that will never know any life outside of work.
A weekend just happened.
Yeah.
I don't even feel like I left.
Yeah, that's how nights and weekends feel here.
You see, this procedure is sold on the idea of work-life balance, balance being the important word here. But work-life balance means a healthy balance of these two things in one single person, one single mind. It takes on an entirely new meaning when you're splitting these things between two different people. What this severance procedure has essentially done is the opposite of work-life balance. But maybe it's not so bad. Maybe this other half of yourself enjoys being at work, and they're having a very fulfilling time during the hours of 9 to 5. But the thing is, you'll never know, because there's only one company which offers this procedure, Lumen, and the only reason that they offer it is so that you can come and work for them, with absolute discretion, on what they call the severed floor, which is the basement of their company headquarters. And this severed floor may not have iron bars, but it is, without a doubt, a corporate prison. Everything about this place is carefully crafted to keep the innies tucked away from the outside world, to keep whatever it is that they're doing down here a secret.
I will be unable to access my personal memories
Whilst on Lumen's severed floor.
The first time we see an employee step onto the severed floor, we're subjected to a long sequence of them walking down a series of winding hallways on the way to their desk. This sequence lasts about 1 minute and 45 seconds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when it's just footage of a man walking, it feels longer. And it's genius, because by the time it's over, there is absolutely no way that you're going to remember this extremely convoluted route he's just taken, simply to get from the entrance to his desk. This long walk really helps to separate the severed floor from the regular world up above, to establish that it's essentially its own universe down here. An artificial one, where everything is uniform and neutral, a corporate maze. And it's not just the opening sequence. Throughout the whole show, it's nearly impossible to tell where all of the characters are in relation to one another. Which sounds like a complaint, but it's really not. That's the point. Because, you see, even the employees don't know anything about this place. They're not allowed to map it out. It's one of the company rules.
Why aren't we supposed to map the office?
It's an Egan rule, render not my creation in miniature.
Why?
And so after this intro, we feel just as disorientated and trapped as these innies do. Even just from the way the workers on the severed floor are shown visually, you can tell it's a prison. They're often boxed in on the frame by the furniture around them. There's a lot of close-ups and claustrophobic camera work going on to make them feel trapped. Whereas on the outside, they're often shot from far away, making them feel free and open. They're given room to breathe. And just like any prison, this one is full of guards, or as they're called here, management. The ones directly above the innies in the chain of command. Their job is to make sure that everyone is staying in line, dishing out rewards for hitting quotas.
You have earned for you and your fellow refiners a 5-minute music dance experience.
But more often than not, handing out punishments to those who aren't conforming and doing what they deem as acceptable work.
Read it.
I don't want to.
No. Do.
You see, the managers have an advantage over the innies in the fact that, unlike them, they aren't severed. They get to leave at the end of the day and keep all of their memories. So naturally, they aren't as in the dark as those who are severed, and they don't have as much to lose either. If a manager gets fired, yeah, they lose their job, but they can always find a new one. But if a severed employee gets fired, then they'll never step foot on the severed floor again, meaning that the innie part of themselves will essentially cease to exist. They have everything to lose. And this is what Lumen does such a fantastic job of, using corporate language to disguise the horror of what they're really doing. They aren't being murdered, they're simply being fired. And these people trapped on this office floor aren't prisoners, they're innies, a much more fun nickname. At one point, we see a Lumen spokesperson on the news defending the company, and she becomes agitated when a critic of Lumen refers to the innies as workies, calling it condescending verbiage.
How could she have that conversation when her workie was the one involved in the conception?
Okay, first of all, working, I think it's exactly the condescending verbiage that I'd expect from a group trying to save people from their own choices.
When the term innie is arguably just as condescending, if not more. The only difference between these two terms is that worky is a much more accurate one. It sums up in a single word what these people are being created to do. But Lumen wants to distract from that fact, and so innie it is. And it's not just the term fired or saying innies and outies. When the innies aren't conforming and doing what they're told by their managers, they're sent to what Lumen call the break room, which sounds like it would be, well, a break from the non-stop work the innies are being subjected to. But really, the break room is a form of psychological torture. You're sent to a room where you're told to repeat a phrase over and over, and you can only leave once you truly mean what you're saying.
Forgive me for the harm I have caused this world.
But this phrase is extremely self-deprecating. It's meant to hammer so much shame into yourself until you truly believe that what you've done is wrong, even if it's simply trying to set yourself free. What we're seeing here is the difference between how Lumen really is and how they want it to be seen. The severed floor is clean and bright. Again, you wouldn't be able to tell it apart from most offices. But this dark break room, tucked away down a narrow corridor as though it's hidden, is where Lumen shows their true colours.
No paraphrasing. Again.
But not all of the manipulation on the 7th floor is quite so obvious. A lot of the time, the employees are being manipulated without them even knowing it, through something as simple as a painting. Despite the series mostly focusing on just one department of the 7th floor, the macrodata refinement team, there are actually many departments hidden away down here. We still don't even really know how many there actually are, or how big the 7th floor even is. There could be dozens, if not hundreds of departments out there, but we know nothing about them because they never really interact with one another. In fact, the departments are scared of each other.
Hi.
This guy's Owen goddamn D who are duplicitous snakes to a 1. It's not safe.
And for good reason. Early on in the show, we learn of a department called O and D, Optics and Design. This department is full of Renaissance-style paintings, which are occasionally put into rotation throughout the halls. But these paintings aren't just pretty art to look at while you work, they're propaganda. You see, the head of the O&D department reveals that his whole team is scared of macrodata refinement, all because of one of these paintings they saw. The painting in question shows all of the members of the macrodata refinement team brutally murdering all of the O&D department. They know it's macrodata refinement because of the colour of the attackers' badges. But the real twisted part of this comes when the painting is accidentally sent to the macrodata refinement team. At first glance, this painting seems identical, but there's one important difference. This time, the roles are reversed. Instead of macrodata murdering all of O&D, it's O&D murdering all of macrodata. So we have the same massacre told from two different perspectives, each one with different instigators. It's played off like this painting was accidentally sent to the macrodata refinement team and they weren't supposed to see it.
I'm sorry, Irving. We must have sent this print job here by mistake. You weren't supposed to see this.
But of course, this is exactly what Lumen wanted, for them to see this painting showing their fellow departments as monsters. They created these paintings and carefully control when they are seen. They even have a code for this manipulation.
You ran a 266 on Irving B?
Yeah. Just now.
So why are they doing this? Well, Lumen is a company full of secrets. We still don't really know what they even do. And each department we learn about helps just a little bit to fill in this puzzle. So by keeping the departments separated, it keeps them in the dark. You do the one task you're assigned and you know nothing less, nothing more. So even if the innies do manage to somehow escape the 7th floor, they can't tell the world about what Lumen has been up to because even they don't know what Lumen's been up to.
What is it we actually do here?
But if the innies are already prisoners down here, why not just order them to stay away from one another? Well, management do try this. Once the departments start working together, they take away the innies' hall privileges. But it seems that these paintings are a much better preemptive measure, because once they do tell them to stay put, it doesn't really work. Because in doing so, that natural curiosity kicks in, and they want to go find answers even more. Management knows it will be easier to keep the innies isolated if they believe that they are the ones choosing to keep to themselves.
I thought it might dissuade him from spending so much time with Bert G.
But why all of the secrets? Why keep all of the departments away from each other? What are they doing down here that is so important that this company is willing to split people's minds in two and keep them locked away to stop whatever it is they know getting out? Well, our biggest clue into what Lumen actually does comes through the macrodata refinement team, as this is the department we spend the most time with. Now, just like a lot of what Lumen does, macrodata refinement sounds vague, and it is vague. We don't see a whole lot of this process, but the gist of it is that you're put in front of a screen with a whole bunch of numbers floating about, and the goal is to keep moving the mouse over these numbers, waiting until you feel something. Some kind of emotion.
The numbers were scary.
And when you do, the goal is to isolate the number which is causing this emotion, which the team refer to as bad data.
You okay? Just fence off the bad data like I showed you.
And move it to one of the bins found at the bottom of the screen.
And bin it. Boom.
Very strange, very mysterious. So what is this bad data they're getting rid of? Well, I believe that what the goal of this mysterious work really is can be found by first taking a look at the founder of Lumen, Keir Egan, and his philosophy. Keir is kind of like businessman Jesus.
Jesus.
No, Keir.
You see, on the severed floor, and a conglomerate, all-powerful company like Lumen, no one holds more power and respect than the original founder. Keir is treated like a god on the severed floor. One of the managers says, "We serve Keir."
We serve Keir, you child!
They have hymns about him and how great he is. A separate wing called the Perpetuity Wing, which acts almost like a temple dedicated to the founder.
The bedroom of Keir, just as he might have left it.
Every department has a collection of company handbooks full of Keir's quotes that look very similar to a Bible and read like one too.
That through me they may be purified and return. No higher purpose may be found than this.
Keir even has 9 tenets, which are one of the main principles of a religion or philosophy. And I mean, it's not all that surprising that Keir is seen as this godlike figure. After all, his company is the one that figured out how to create life seemingly out of thin air. When an employee becomes severed, a new consciousness is being created. A whole new person with their own feelings and opinions, who wouldn't exist if it weren't for Keir and the technology that his company would go on to create. The Innies may be in a living hell, but they do owe their existence to Keir. So what is Keir's philosophy? Well, throughout the show, we learn of the 4 tempers, the 4 tempers being 4 emotions. First, we have woe, which is shown by a bride, and is essentially a fancy way of saying sorrow. Then we have dread, which is shown by an old woman. Then frolic, which is kinda fun and getting a little bit silly and wacky, shown by a fool. And lastly, malice, the desire to harm someone, shown by a goat. The most we learn about these 4 tempers comes from one of the propaganda paintings put into rotation on the severed floor, which shows the founder Keir going into a cave and taming these 4 emotions. This bright light shining behind Keir as though he's this force of good coming in to put these emotions in their place, as they lie on the floor in the dark, scared. And this painting, I think, is the biggest piece of evidence towards Lumen's motivations, and what the macrodata refinement team are really working on. Lumen is an all-powerful worldwide conglomerate, and what more would a CEO of a company like this want than to remove all emotion from both himself and his employees? By wanting to tame these tempers, it's clear that Keir views them as a weakness. He sees emotion as messy and unpredictable, a source of distraction. He wants his employees to be serving their work, not their emotions. And I believe that this is what the macrodata refinement team are doing with all these numbers, training themselves to recognize these emotions and what triggers them.
The numbers were scary.
Isolating them and tucking them away in a bin where they're controlled. Lumen are trying to get them to follow in Keir's footsteps, controlling their emotions to become the perfect businessmen and businesswomen. And it's not just the work that's tailored around controlling your emotions, but the rewards for good behaviour too. After the macrodata refinement team hit their quarterly quota, one of the characters is treated to a nice little reward, what Lumen calls a waffle party, which actually might be the strangest scene in a show which is already pretty strange. If you're lucky enough to be treated to a waffle party, you're brought to a fancy room in Keir's house, and given a plate of waffles as well as a mask of the founder Keir to wear. Right. But that's not even the weirdest part. Next, 4 dancers dressed in lingerie come out and start dancing in front of you. But these aren't any old dancers. These ones are dressed as the 4 tempers: the bride, the old woman, the jester, the goat. It seems like this waffle party is just another way of testing the employees. By placing these dancers in front of them, they're supposed to act as a temptation, a distraction. I mean, this whole sequence is essentially a recreation of the Four Tempers painting. Just look at the way that the employee, wearing the mask of the founder, sat in the founder's room, sits incredibly still during this performance. He doesn't react at all to these dancers. Not even one awooga, boing boing, humana humana. And it wouldn't surprise me if he was instructed beforehand to not show any interest in these tempers, to make it as accurate a recreation of the painting as possible. Even the routine wellness sessions that the innies are required to take part in revolve around controlling your emotions. These wellness sessions are supposed to act like therapy, where you sit down in a dimly lit room with a nice little tree while a woman with a relaxing voice tells you various facts about your outer self, meant to reassure you that your outie is living a very fulfilling life. Your outie likes this, your outie is great at that, so on.
Your outie is generous.
But if the innie shows too much emotion around any one of these facts, they're scolded and told to enjoy each fact equally.
I'm sorry. Please try to enjoy each fact equally.
Once again, emotion coming through is seen as a bad thing, even though this is supposed to be a wellness session. It's the complete opposite of what we would call therapy on the outside world, where you're encouraged to show emotion. But the messed up part is that despite management putting so much effort into trying to get the innies to tame their tempers, to control their emotions, they're often even worse at controlling their emotions. Especially the boss of the 7th floor, Miss Cabell. Miss Cabell is clearly a Keir fanatic. She knows his 9 tenets and the Lumen hymns off by heart.
Keir, chosen one, Keir.
She even has a shrine to Keir in her home, and performs a sort of ritual where she dresses up to make herself look how she did when she was younger. The exact same look as in one of the photos on the shrine, with the same pigtails, from when she was back at school. But from this photo, we know that Miss Cabell didn't attend just any old school. She went to the Myrtle Egan School for Girls. So it's clear that she was indoctrinated by Lumen from a very young age. And it's not all that surprising that a company and family who so focused on shaping the way that people think would have their own school, as it's a known fact that propaganda works better on a young, impressionable mind. If a cult can get you when you're young, they're far more likely to have you for life. And that seems to be what's happened here with Miss Cabell. She spent her whole life serving Keir.
Tame in me the tempers for, that I may serve thee evermore.
But despite growing up in an environment like this, and being the boss of the 7th floor, she does a pretty bad job of following Keir's ideology. You see, most of the time, she is very monotone and calm, a great student of Keir.
Mark, would you place your key card on my desk?
But this never lasts long. When the innies are misbehaving, she throws her stapler at the wall, and she flips into a rage simply by someone questioning what it is Lumen does.
What is it we actually do here?
We serve Keir, you child!
And when later on, her questionable actions get her fired from Lumen, the word hysterical doesn't even begin to describe it.
Fuck her goddamn soul!
It's almost disturbing how angry she is, going home and tearing up all of her Lumen and Keir memorabilia. And I don't think it's a coincidence how this scene is placed in between shots of the waffle party, where the innie, dressed as Keir, is showing almost no emotion, acting incredibly nonchalant. It creates this great contrast. On one hand, what Keir wants from his workers, and on the other, what he sees as a weakness. Miss Cabell wants nothing more than to please Keir, yet she is exactly what Keir despises. Someone who is highly emotional and lets it guide their actions, even if this emotion stems from her love for the company. And that's what makes her such a complex character. So if even the boss of the severed floor can't control her emotions, then how are the severed employees who are cooped up their whole lives expected to? Lumen can lock them away and carry out all of these bizarre methods to try and subtly, and not so subtly, make them tame their tempers. But as long as these innies are human, then these human traits will always push to the surface. And that's the best thing about Severance, is that despite the world of the show being so cold and soulless and corporate, the characters have so much heart. There isn't no joy to be found on the severed floor, because the innies manage to find meaning and happiness through each other, through being around other innies. In a way, the Macrodata refinement team are like a family, because they're all on the same level. People bond through shared experiences, especially bad experiences. And there's a level of understanding we have with one another when we're at the same job, on the same level. Of course, there's always that one suck-up or that one colleague you don't get along with. But when you stick people together for 9 hours a day, 5 days a week, connections are bound to be made. Now imagine if your colleagues are the only people you'll ever know, the only people you ever have known, and you're still human. You still have human urges, like attraction, humour, anger. These connections and these emotions would be amplified to an insane degree. Emotions like romance. There's a pretty common saying in offices about work wives and work husbands. That person who you just can't stop flirting it up with. The old Jim and Pam. And in Severance, we see this work romance play out in a very fascinating way, through the characters of Bert and Irving. Irving is a part of the Macrodata refinement team, and from the get-go he is completely pro-Lumen, pro the company.
That's James Egan, current CEO. Remarkable man.
He is as close as we see to their idea of a perfect employee. He laps up all of the propaganda and never questions anything. He knows all of the company history, their philosophy, and is often scolding the other members when they start acting against Lumen's best interests, or even just joking around.
It's the perpetuity wing. It's the Egans. It's the living soul of Lumen.
When discussing one of the paintings that was placed into rotation in the hallways, Irving admits that he actually cried when it was put up because he was so overwhelmed with emotion. He's a man who seemingly lives to work, a perfect fit for Severance. And looking at Irving's life outside of the severed floor, this isn't all that surprising. Before Irving became severed, we know that he was in the military, and this military background is probably part of what makes him such a perfect fit for Severance. Because he's already spent a lot of time in an environment where you have to follow orders, without question. And I think it would be pretty reasonable to say that Irving is likely at least a little bit patriotic. I mean, that's a pretty common trait of someone going into the military. And this patriotism seems to carry over to his innie. He's fine with all of the mysterious work and never getting to leave this place, because he truly believes that the work they're doing and the suffering they're enduring is for the greater good. Because Lumen tells them it's for the greater good.
Each of these is a real smile from someone on the outside. Someone Lumen Industries has helped.
He has complete faith in the company. But this all changes when he meets Bert, an employee from the O&D department, the one with all the paintings. Irving immediately becomes infatuated with Bert because he also seems to be very pro-Lumen, and the two bond over their shared love of the company and the company history, a romance quickly blossoming.
Most people only think of O&D when new handbook totes come in.
Well, I love those too.
I love the Smiths.
Sorry?
I said I love the Smiths.
Leaving Irving feeling conflicted, he wants to take his relationship with Bert further and let it grow. But on the severed floor, where work is all that really matters, this isn't possible. I mean, the two can't go on a date, and as Irving says himself,
relationships beyond the platonic are frowned upon anyway.
They want to be together, but the company is keeping them apart. And this is when Irving's loyalty begins to waver. For the first time, he starts putting his own feelings before Lumen. So even this ideal, perfect employee completely devoted to the company can only fight off his human urges for so long. This whole romance that plays out between Bert and Irving takes place over just a couple interactions. Just 7 scenes throughout the show involve these two characters together, with a total runtime of 21 minutes. And let's just be generous and double it, because there could be some time they spend together that we don't get to see. That means that Irving and Bert have gone from strangers to having these strong feelings for each other in just 42 minutes. And this could be seen as unbelievable, but I don't think it is, because the innies are essentially like children. This romance is the equivalent of your first relationship back in school, where you became infatuated with each other almost instantly. And there's almost an innocence to this relationship. The most we see them do is slightly hold hands. But this is enough for them, because they're so starved of human contact that even this is probably the most intimacy that either one of them has ever had. And through this romance and this storyline, we get one of the most haunting scenes in the entire show, when Irving goes to see Bert one day, only to discover they are throwing him a retirement party.
How about a round of applause for the man of the hour, huh?
Once again, Lumen is doing what Lumen do best, taking something incredibly ordinary that you wouldn't think twice about, and giving it an incredibly dark meaning hiding just below the surface. Because at this retirement party, everyone is so happy, it's a party. There's Water Malone and a little banner, and everyone's smiling and reminiscing, celebrating Bert's new freedom now that he doesn't have to work anymore. But this isn't really freedom, and this shouldn't be called a party, because let's be honest, this retirement party is really a death sentence and a funeral. Yes, Bert will never have to work again, but only the outie Bert. Innie Bert will never again wake up. Once he leaves the 7th floor for the final time, this consciousness will cease to exist. Innie Bert has put in all of the work, done everything that's asked of him, but in the end, he won't get to live to see this retirement. He's being cast aside so outie Bert can reap the rewards. At this retirement party, a video is played, a message from outie Bert to innie Bert, thanking him for his service. And outie Bert comes across so condescending.
And Bert, I see you. Congratulations. Good job, buddy.
Like he's talking to a child, when we know that innie Bert is highly sophisticated and intelligent. It's this overly friendly, hey buddy, message from the one who trapped him in here in the first place. Granted, he doesn't know about the cruelty going on down here, but it's still incredibly uncomfortable and tragic knowing what we know about this place. This message is only about a minute long, and it ends with outie Bert rattling off a few meaningless phrases.
Good job, buddy. Bon voyage.
Before checking his watch and gesturing for the camera to be switched off, as though this is all just a bit of an inconvenience, like he's being made to make this video because it's encouraged by Lumen. It's clear that Bert didn't even write any of this down, he's just ad-libbing whatever comes to his mind in this moment.
No recollection of actually ever meeting you, no idea of your names, even how many of you there are. Anyway, I just want to say thank you all.
It's far from a heartfelt eulogy, but it's not even that surprising he treats his innie this way, because the two have never even had a conversation. It's really easy, I think, for people to turn a blind eye to suffering, even if it's themselves that's suffering, as long as they can't actually see it in front of them. Before you actually see it, it seems less real. When outie Bert walks through Lumen's doors at the end of the day and wakes up again, it all probably just feels like a bad dream, hidden away in his subconscious. And this video gives us a really great insight into how the outies view their innie counterparts, and the psychology of someone who would go through with this, how they can rationalize it to themselves. Because if you listen to outie Bert's phrasing, when referring to his innie, instead of saying you, he says I.
I must like you very much, and though today is my last day with you,
implying that he views his innie and him as the same person, when that's just not really true. They have completely separate lives and experiences, completely different memories. But by thinking of his innie as an extension of himself, he can justify trapping his innie on the severed floor as, well, he's also trapping himself on the severed floor. It's just only one of them actually experiences being trapped. And Irving calls out this injustice.
You're all just gonna stand here and let him die?
It's such a satisfying moment to see this goody-goody kind of suck-up finally crack and see this place for what it really is. A prison and a death camp. He even asks if they're being punished by the creator. He's grappling with his faith in this company that he's put so much of himself into. The same company which is now taking away the one person who brings him the most joy. It's a harsh realization for Irving that he can do everything that Lumen wants of him, be this perfect employee, but one day he will also be cast aside and retired with just as little empathy. And so this devotion he has for Lumen changes now. He walks back to his team and gives us a line which I don't think would be as impactful as it is if it wasn't for the fact that it's coming from him.
Let's burn this place to the ground.
The more that Lumen has tried to control Irving's tempers, the stronger they've gotten. You can be completely devoted to a company or an institution, but there's only so much you can put up with. And Irving is living proof that Kier's ideology is wrong. People do need something other than just work to thrive. You can lock people away in a basement, take away all of their freedom and rights, throw as much propaganda in their face as you can think of, but these tempers will always push through. And I can't wait to see how Season 2 continues this story. I really hope we get to learn more about these tempers and more about Kier himself. As I'm finishing this video, there's been 6 episodes of the new season and we've already learnt so much. This show is not slowing down at all. It's diving deeper into its concept in a way I'm really happy with so far. This really is a once in a decade kind of show where everything, the world, the characters, the story is all so well thought out and so well realized that you can really spend just hours theorizing and discussing it. I remember when it first came out, it was popular, but I don't think it was quite yet a hit. But it seems to have really grown and grown over the years since this first season, and now it feels like everyone is talking about Severance. And I really respect Apple TV for having faith that this show does have legs, and if done well, and if allowed to take risks, it will continue to grow. It's something which Netflix seems to be pretty bad at over recent years. If a show isn't a smash hit out the gate, chances are it's getting canned. They don't allow their series to build audiences over several seasons, and it's beginning to really ruin their reputation. And I think it's because Apple TV doesn't release all of their episodes at once, like Netflix does. Which at first I was like, oh man, I gotta wait 8 weeks for this. But as the series is going on, I'm starting to really appreciate the weekly release schedule, especially with a show like Severance, where so much is going on and it's this building mystery each week. You have so much more time to take everything in, and by watching it over a few months rather than a few days, it stays on your mind for much longer and has more of an impact. It's a really nice change of pace, and I honestly hope that we start moving back towards weekly releases. But that's a topic for another video. Thank you for watching up until this point. Have a nice day and praise Kier. Mr. Milchek, dance me out.